Welcome to Curiosity Zone. In today's video we will be delving into 10 most corrupt leaders in the world. Corrupt leaders have plagued the world since the creation of organized societies. In the modern era, this has escalated as more money and wealth have circulated around the globe, tainted by the power they wield, cannot resist the opportunity to get their hands on some dirty cash. Political leaders who enact the most egregious abuses of power regularly make use of mechanisms such as embezzlement, money laundering, and extortion. Those who gain a few thousand may get away with it, but for the highest profile cases, where hundreds of millions of dollars go missing, keeping it a secret is often more difficult than the fraudulent action itself. A corrupt leader is anyone in a position of power within a government that uses their influence to illegally benefit themselves or someone else. This benefit could be in the form of money, increased influence, or political favors. A common example is embezzlement, where leaders appropriate funds from public projects or schemes and funnel them into their own pockets. Acts of corruption represent an affront to the ideals of a healthy democracy, and therefore, corrupt leaders become disgraced in their countries, with some even facing formal corruption charges. Number 1 on our list is Muhammad Suharto, President of Indonesia, 1967 to 1998, funds embezzled, $25 billion. Muhammad Suharto was the second president of Indonesia and served for a record 31 years from 1967 to 1998. Suharto oversaw a military dictatorship, which evolved into an authoritarian regime built on his own cult of personality, and ended his rule with a personal net worth of $38 billion. Following an economic downturn in 1997 that Indonesia was slow to recover from, prominent politicians began blaming Suharto and protests began in earnest that year. After mounting pressure and desertion by his political allies in May 1998, Suharto resigned. He has been investigated for corruption numerous times since his resignation and was accused of embezzling $571 million of government funds through various personal charity foundations. Other lawsuits in Indonesia have sought to order Suharto to repay up to $1.5 billion in scholarship funds that supposedly disappeared during his tenure. Suharto was never prosecuted. He died on the 27th of January 2008. While some sees him as hero, some sees him as the father of corruption in Indonesia. Number 2, Ferdinand Marcos, President of the Philippines, 1972 to 1986, funds embezzled, $7.5 billion. Ferdinand Marcos entered politics in the late 1940s after World War II. He ran for election in 1965 and won, partially due to his claims of bravery and achievement during the war. During his second term from 1969 to 1972, Marcos oversaw a debt crisis resulting from his policy of high public expenditure on infrastructure projects. This led to civil interest and rising political opposition, which caused Marcos to declare martial law, placing him in sole charge of the country. This period lasted until 1986, when his reign as leader ended. In 1986, Marcos was forced to call a snap election due to his rising unpopularity and coup threats, which ended in complex indecision as various vote counts declared different winners. A revolution followed and Marcos was forced to flee to Hawaii. Marcos took with him around $717 million in cash, numerous crates of valuable physical objects, gold, and deposit slips totaling $124 million. All of this was amassed illegally during his time in power. In all, he is thought to have stolen $10 billion from the Philippines Central Bank. He died in January 1995 without facing justice. Number 3, Viktor Yanukovych, President and Prime Minister of Ukraine, 2002 to 2014, funds embezzled, $5 billion. Viktor Yanukovych held the positions of Prime Minister and President of Ukraine variously from 2002 to 2014. During his time in office, he became increasingly sympathetic to his affiliation with Russia and represented the interests of big business in Ukraine. After the Ukrainian parliament voted to sign documents to more closely tie the country to the EU, Yanukovych instead decided to reject the vote at the last minute under pressure from Russia. This angered the majority of the Ukrainian populace, who were a mostly anti-Russian influence, and led to the Euromaidan protests. Yanukovych fled to Russia and entered a self-imposed exile. On the 22nd of February 2014, the Ukrainian parliament voted in favor of his impeachment, leading to the discovery of his embezzlement activities. Amongst a host of corrupt actions, Yanukovych was found to have used $220 million of state funds to set up a private communication company, stole $1.5 billion in assets from the state including property, and generally used public funds for his own personal enjoyment. Number 4. Mobutu Sese Seko, President of Zaire, 1965–1997, funds embezzled, $5 billion. Mobutu Sese Seko was President of Zaire, now known as the Democratic Republic of the Congo, from 1965 to 1997. After gaining independence from Belgium in 1960, Zaire went through a period of political turmoil during which Seko was the chief of staff of the army. With the backing of the USA, Seko overthrew the elected left-wing leader Patrice Lumumba and installed his own autocratic government. Known for his extravagant shopping sprees in Paris, speculation about his corruption was never far from the truth. Conservative estimates state that Seko embezzled $5 billion directly from the state's purse, using the money to fund a luxurious lifestyle and buy gifts for his cronies. He is considered to be one of the richest world leaders of all time and was eventually deposed by a military coup in 1997. He died months later of prostate cancer without being prosecuted. Number 5. Sani Abacha, military head of state of Nigeria, 1993 to 1998, funds embezzled, $2 billion. Like many of the people on this list, Sani Abacha began his career as a military officer and became leader of Nigeria after seizing power in 1993 following a coup d'état. He ruled for a shorter period of time than others due to his death in 1998, overseeing a strengthening of Nigeria's economy but a violent approach to discipline. Because of Nigeria's unprecedented economic growth, the amount of money flowing through the country dramatically increased. This presented an opportunity for Abacha that he couldn't resist. By setting up fake government funding requests, Abacha directly stole money sent from Nigeria's central bank, laundered it abroad, and deposited it in offshore bank accounts. Estimates vary, but in Jersey alone, they discovered an account holding $267 million linked to Abacha. On 8 June 1998, Abacha died in the Aso Rock Presidential Villa in Abuja. He was buried on the same day according to Muslim tradition and without an autopsy, fueling speculation that he may have been assassinated. The government identified the cause of death as a sudden heart attack. Number 6. Najib Razak, Prime Minister of Malaysia, 2009 to 2018, funds embezzled, $4.5 billion. Najib Razak had been a politician in Malaysia for decades before he was elected as Prime Minister in 2009. During his time in power, he opened the country to more foreign investment and pursued a strategy of imprisoning his political opponents. Due to his links with the One Malaysia Development Berhad investment firm, which had been accused of embezzling money from the Malaysian Sovereign Wealth Fund, Razak began to face rising criticism in 2013. After he lost a general election in 2018, he was arrested by Malaysian anti-corruption investigators. In all, Razak was found guilty of embezzling $1 billion from Malaysia's wealth fund with more expected held in assets. He was jailed in 2022 for 12 years and fined $45 million. Number 7. Slobodan Milosevic, President of Serbia, Yugoslavia, 1989 to 2000. Milosevic was a key figure during the bloody breakup of Yugoslavia. First rising to power as the President of Serbia in 1989, Milosevic became the President of the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia in 1997. The politics of Yugoslavia was, and still is, incredibly complex with multiple ethnic groups involved in conflict with each other. Milosevic supported ethnic Serbs and aided in negotiating an end to the Bosnian War in 1995. He was put on trial for war crimes by the UN, whilst still in power in 1999, eventually losing power in the 2000 elections. He was arrested soon after by Yugoslav authorities on charges of corruption and embezzlement, with his trial lasting 5 years. He died in prison in 2006. Number 8. Jean-Claude Duvalier, President of Haiti, 1971 to 1986, funds embezzled, $800 million. Jean-Claude Duvalier was part of the Duvalier dynasty, a family that had ruled the Caribbean island of Haiti from 1957. Duvalier succeeded his father in 1971 following his death and maintained the violent, autocratic style of governance that had preceded him. Thousands died or were tortured under the rule of Duvalier, whilst he lived a lavish lifestyle in the faces of Haitians that were amongst the most impoverished in the world. After a popular revolution in 1986, Duvalier was forced to flee in exile to France. He remained there until 2011, when he returned to Haiti claiming he wanted to help build the country. He was arrested 2 days later and charged with corruption and embezzlement, but died in 2014 before he could be prosecuted. Number 9. Alberto Fujimori, President of Peru, 1990 to 2000, funds embezzled, $600 million. Fujimori was elected to office in 1990 and almost immediately implemented vast neoliberal economic reforms. He quickly revealed dictator-like tendencies after he enacted a self-coup to oust opposition in the Congress so that he could govern unopposed. He also made use of a death squad to take out political rivals and torture those connected with them. Fujimori was re-elected twice, but both are heavily disputed on grounds of election rigging. Soon after his third win in 2000, Fujimori's involvement in bribery was made public and he fled to Japan to offer his resignation as president. Upon his return to the country to run for president once more in 2005, he was arrested within hours. He was tried for human rights abuses and embezzlement, found guilty, and sentenced to 32 years in prison.